In our last lecture, we were in the Cyclades first. These pink islands up here are the Cyclades. That's where we found those first large-scale sculptures of women and the lyre players. And then we went down to Crete, and we see Knossos here. And of course, Thera and Akrotiri are up here. That's where we saw those last frescoes, the boxing children and the young girl gathering crocuses. But today we're looking at Mycenae, and just as an information, here's Troy. I highly suggest that you all find the movie Troy and watch it, because it's a really good depiction of the culture between Mycenae and Troy. So I'm giving you this map again because I think it's great to be sort of situated to understand where we are. So Athens is up here. Mycenae is over here. And in this lecture, we're going to be in Mycenae, although we're going to look at a cup. Here's Vapheio. That's where we find this Vapheio cup. And then when we go up to Greece, well, we'll look at the Romans first, but in Greece, then we look at these other places, Sparta and Athens. So again, Troy's way over here in Anatolia, which is now Turkey. Before we look at the ancient Greeks, we'll take a little trip over here to Italy, and we will look at the Romans and the Etruscans. So it's important to understand that mainland Greece is pretty much out of touch with all of its neighbors. It's sort of doing its own thing. With the exception of the Cyclades, there is trade with the Cyclades. In 1600, there's some evidence of contact with Crete, but the Minoan culture was basically peaceful. They lived on their island. They were fortified by their island. They had everything they needed. There was no reason really to fight a war with anybody. That's a lot of the reason. Whether the fact that it was a matriarchal culture had anything to do with it, I don't know. I'm just thinking about this right now. It's almost sometimes when I do these lectures, it's like I'm talking to you, and often I think of these things as I'm lecturing. We do know that the Minoan culture was peaceful. We don't know for sure if it was matriarchal or not. We can make our own conclusions about all of it, really. We do know the Mycenaeans were much more warlike. So around 1400, the leadership of the Aegean passes to the Mycenaeans, and they begin expanding. They dominate into Asia Minor, they dominate westward into Italy, and they have a whole empire from 1400 to 1200, great prosperity and uniformity of culture. So this is called the Helladic period, and it goes from 3000 to 1000 BCE. So this is on mainland Greece, so you can go back and look at your date timelines to see where the dates overlap. These Mycenaeans have a unilateral culture. They conquer, and they are one culture throughout their entire empire, kind of like the Roman Empire did later. Their architecture will have two citadels, the citadel of Mycenae and Tiryns, and some sculpture, metalwork, and ceramics from them, and tombs. So we do have some vocabulary here. I think I gave this to you in the last lecture as well. Probably the most important architectural terms are these citadels we're going to look at. A citadel is a defended city, and for obvious reasons, this is the kind of city the Mycenaeans built. We did not see a citadel in the palace complex at Knossos. They had no need for such a thing. So they didn't build a ring wall, which is a hallmark of a citadel. And so in a citadel that you have a large ring wall, you need a relieving arch because you have to get in and out. So they build an arch up into the wall above a post and lintel to help support the wall above, so you can have a huge gate that'll be big enough to let horses and carts and armies and men through. It transfers all the load to the side walls. So this image is, to me, the quintessential image of the Mycenaeans. This is the Mask of Agamemnon. It's a funerary mask from the royal tombs in the Grove Circle at Mycenae in Greece. And so the Mycenaeans created these masks and put them over the figures that they laid into tombs. So it's made out of repoussé hammered gold. They believed that these masks help the soul recognize the body in the afterlife. This is the Vapheio cup, and it was found a tomb at Vapheio, which is near Sparta. And if you look back on the map we pointed out at the beginning of this section, this was created from 1650 to 1450. So high degree of metalworking here, although it's unclear whether the Mycenaeans made these themselves or whether these were objects that they got somewhere else. But you can see the beautiful bull leaping form on this cup. Some scholars think it was created in Crete and exported to mainland Greece. The imagery on the cup and the fact that there was an advanced metalworking technology in Crete would support that fact. The olive trees may or may not imply sacred ground here. Now, tombs were looted long before Schliemann arrived in the 1870s to search for Homeric Greece, and we have shaft graves in Mycenae that reveal an even earlier culture. So there aren't very many of these artifacts surviving, but this one we do have. It's another Rhyton. It's gold, and it's from a shaft grave at Mycenae. Again, it's created out of this repoussé technique, and these vertical pits were enclosed in a circle of standing stone slabs, interestingly enough. Try to say that 10 times fast. These shaft graves were found enclosed in circles of standing stone slabs. And this is where they also found men wearing gold grave masks, and they found objects like this Rhyton in these graves as well. Here's another object that was found in one of these shaft graves. This is from shaft grave 4, and it's a dagger blade. So again, look at the way they've created the images on this blade, giving the action to the blade and giving it power. This is a different dagger blade. This one has a lion hunt. And another thing that's interesting about both of these is that the animals are crouching and they're leaping. They're in flying gallop poses. They conform to the shape of the dagger, and they give the dagger energy. So I keep telling you they're found in these graves and tombs. Well, what do these tombs look like? Here is a beehive tomb. So the earliest burials were in shaft graves. So that dagger blade, that Rhyton, those were found in shaft graves. But that mask of Agamemnon was found in a tomb like this one. And the Mycenaeans had a much greater emphasis on tombs than the Minoans did. I mean, we really haven't talked at all about Minoan tombs, right? We don't really have them. But the Mycenaeans built these very elaborate beehives tombs, and they laid out their dead with all their weapons, with their gold, with their jewelry, as we've seen. So these above ground beehive tombs are created after 1600. This is the tholos from what's called the treasury of Atreus. And this is actually the biggest uninterrupted open space in Europe from over 1,000 years. So inside here is this large beehive tomb. It's built into the ground. So this is the entrance into it. You can imagine walking in, and then where these two empty spots are, there actually were two lion-headed figures. And the top of this is done with corbeling. This is what it will be like when you go inside and you look up into the dome of the beehive. And here's the structure of it. So it's this corbelled structure, and the bricks are just brought inward so that the walls don't collapse into the center. This is an aerial view of a Mycenaean citadel. And I think this is the citadel at Tiryns, but I'm not sure. It may be at Mycenae. Basically, the Mycenaean citadel sites were complexes with large ring walls around them. You can see the ring wall around the outside of this, that thick wall that is steep, and very tall. So you would be on a road. You can see the road at the bottom right of this slide, and you would wind around, and then you can see where the gate is on the left. You come into that gate to get inside the citadel. Now, these walls are over 20 feet thick. So what happened is we have a Neolithic culture in mainland Greece. Greek-speaking people moved into the mainland, and they displaced the Neolithic culture there. So the Minoan culture declines around 1500 BCE, and at that time, the Mycenaeans come into power on the mainland. And so here is an aerial view of a plan of the citadel at Tiryns. And so you can see where the gate is, the approach ramp in the center, the outer propylon, and then the outer ring walls on it. So you can see on the top of this where you would be able to come in, and then of course this wall extends. So all of the rooms inside the walls are all vaulted with corbelling. And here's a view inside those outer walls of the citadel with these what's called Corbel vaulted casemates. So if you think back to that diagram that I showed you a minute ago in the inside of the beehive tomb, the tholos, you can see again a copy of that type of construction and the way these rocks are just brought inward to sort of lean together at the top on the keystone. This relieves all the weight to the outer wall. So these palaces resemble those of the Minoans, but they had to fortify them because they don't have the sea around them. So a citadel is a fortress or defended city. Here's the Lion Gate of Mycenae, and if you've got the 5th edition, it's on page 100, and this is a really good example of the type of construction. Notice the lions above this gate. This is what I was talking about when we looked at that entranceway to the tholos. 2 pairs of lions would have been butting up against each other here as well. So think of these, think of the guardian lions back at the Palace of Sargon. We have a running theme of lions as guardians for kings here, even though they're completely independent cultures. So the triangular area above the lintel, this is called relieving arch. And these are the corbelled stones that reach up to stop at the top. And so again, it supports the wall above it because all of the load gets transferred down to these side walls. Of course, a lot of the wall above it is gone, but there was more wall there. So the Lion Gate itself was made a century later than the first ring walls. But I like this picture because it gives you a sense of the scale of it. It's not quite so massive as some of the other things that we've seen. Big enough for 3 men and horses side by side, but not massive. The heads of these lions, which are missing, would have been made separately of gold. Here's a sculpture found at Mycenae, which again, I find very interesting if you think back to the woman from Knossos, and if you think back to that niello technique that they're using in their metalwork, there's so many similarities in this little carving. This is ivory and it's only 2 3/4 inches. I really believe it's a Mycenaean Minoan exchange. The hallmarks of the Minoan arc are definitely here. And so I want to end with this warrior vase, which was found in Mycenae between 1300 to 1100 BCE, and it's a ceramic at 16 inches high. Now, we've had sort of an ongoing theme of ceramics throughout this course, beginning with the ancient Near East, looking at the Egyptians. Obviously, ceramics are central to any culture. If you think about it, they're necessary for daily and economic life. But here, we have this regular rhythm of marching soldiers. It's sort of overtaken this vibrant movement that we saw in the fish frescoes or the scenes on the Vapheio cup. And this is a precursor of things to come in Greek ceramics. And again, we'll end with some vocabulary. So in conclusion, the Mycenaean civilization did not have a very long history. They were invaded in 1200 BCE. And so this 1100 to 900 BCE is characterized as a Greek Dark Age. There is a new age forming that we'll see in Unit 2. So now all of our threads are complete. The thread from the ancient Near East leading up to Persepolis, the threads from the Egyptians leading up through and into the time of Antony and Cleopatra, and now our Aegean and Mycenaean threads as well.